Chapter 27. Bootlegging Made Easy. My great-aunt Tilly was tiny, and when she sat down to play her concertina, she needed a footstool. She was married to my dad's Uncle Dave, who was his father Max's, my Zadie's brother. The brothers bore a resemblance to each other, although Dave was taller, and supposedly, when I was a toddler, I saw Uncle Dave coming down the street, thought it was Zadie, and ran to him, stopping in my tracks when I got close enough to see that he wasn't my grandfather. No one realized then how nearsighted I was. When I knew them in my early teens, Tilly and Dave lived in Short Beach, Connecticut, outside of New Haven. The community was aptly named because it boasted a beach that couldn't have been more than 100 yards long. They lived in a 2-story, weather-beaten house, a couple of doors from the beach, with their son Fred, his wife Evelyn, and their daughters, 2 of my favorite cousins, Carol and Maxine. Next door lived another son, Harold, and his wife Dottie. A third son, Oscar, came and went. The brothers owned and operated a potato chip franchise. They delivered Wise potato chips, candy, cookies, and crackers to a lot of mom-and-pop stores and a few small supermarkets in their area. Those potato chips were delicious. Harold and Fred were good salesmen, and both were very personable. So business was good, and growing. One of my favorite summertime activities was to visit the Rogosin clan in Short Beach. The family name was Rogosin, but once, when Uncle Dave worked for Thomas A. Edison, he, Edison, decided to help his employees with their citizenship papers. Uncle Dave told him his name was Rogosin, but the hard of hearing Edison rolled Roganson, and Dave was too shy to correct him. At least that's the story my cousin Fred expected us to believe. Another family name variation is Rogers. Henry Rogers of Rogers & Cohen, the international PR firm, was my father's second cousin, and he was very nice to both my brother and me when each of us went to him for a job. Unfortunately, neither of us was able to convince him that the public relations was our obsession. Then there was the very wealthy philanthropist, Israel Rogosin, who my father once looked up mercilessly to establish a family tie. Israel is the name on my father's birth certificate. Deborah, the family archivist, said they were both named for the same person. That Israel Rogosin was the founder of a very successful company, Bucknet Mills, and his hospitals, clinics, and a street in Israel named for him. His son Lionel became a well-known documentary filmmaker, whom we met on a couple of occasions. 2 of his films, On the Bowery and Come Back Africa, won international acclaim. Anyway, my father looked up Israel, who was guarded and skeptical. During what I imagine was their somewhat strained conversation, he told my father this story. When Russia still had a czar, a servant named Rogosin formed a minor service for him. Picked a fly from his borscht, my father said. Pleased, the Tsar exempted everyone named Rogosin from the draft in perpetuity. As a result, a lot of non-Rogosians assumed the name, becoming draft dodgers, and they, Israel insisted, must have been our relatives. My father was not impressed. As a matter of fact, he was annoyed, particularly since Israel looked very much like a relative. Dad left the meeting, convinced that if there was any merit to the story, it was Israel's family who were the imposters. Cousin Fred Roganson grew up very close to my dad's family, staying with him on occasion in Boston when he was a kid, and sleeping on blankets on boards laid across the bathtub. One could only imagine the restless nights he must have endured with the comings and goings. The quarters were intimate, to say the least, but the family would have been close in any event. Fred had a crush on my mother when she married my father, and made no bones about it throughout their lifelong friendship. His faithful and loving wife Evelyn understood and tolerated him. Their entire clan was energetic and filled with fun. Uncle Dave was a machinist, I think, before he retired, and half a finger was missing as a result of a moment's carelessness. I thought that was marvelous, and always asked to look at it. His passion was inventions, and the basement was cluttered with evidence of his tinkering. My dad was impressed with some of the household gadgets Dave had produced and tried to help him obtain patents. In Short Beach, we swam, played catch on the sand, took long walks, my 2 young cousins and I, my brother Roy tagging along sometimes. We trudged a mile or so in the ice cream shop for pawnbroker Sundays. 3 scoops of ice cream, like 3 traditional globes, which I never heard of before, and gobbled up pizza pies, which we had never tasted. Evelyn claimed pizza was native to New Haven. By late afternoon, we'd be tired, covered with dirt and sand, and we'd wash off the outdoor shower and back, splashing each other clean. At night, the grown-ups would talk and laugh and reminisce, and Tilly would play the concertina. When we weren't listening to the stories or the music, we were all singing. They made up a song that sounded like, Tsgna Bobkis, I love you, doo-da, doo-da, but I never figured out what that meant. I read somewhere that in Russian, Bobkis meant beans, but I'm pretty sure what they were singing was, things aren't too great, but who gives a shit, doo-da, doo-da. I rarely seen my father so happy and relaxed. Some of the stories I could not get enough of were about Tilly and Dave's bootlegging operation during Prohibition. They told the stories together, interrupting each other good-naturedly with detail and nuance. Looking at them then, the tiny woman with the gleaming eye and the dark curly hair, the gaunt man with the grizzled beard, gnarled hands and glasses, 2 people who were old but still vital. It was once easy and difficult to picture them in their criminal pursuits. They talked with conviction, their memories undiminished by age. David constructed a still in the backyard, and in the basement he used sheets of copper to fabricate containers the size and shape of books. Together, they'd fill the containers with their illicit brew and cover them with real book jackets to complete the subterfuge. Then they'd load the books onto the back seat of their car, and Tilly would get behind the wheel and take off for New York or New Jersey. If anyone stopped the car for any reason, he'd discover a pleasant little lady, barely able to reach the pedals, who was apparently a voracious reader. How we loved to hear those stories, and how they loved to tell them. Once or twice, I drove Cousin Fred's potato chip delivery route with him, sitting high in the seat beside him in the small, well-worn truck as he guided it through the familiar, bustling streets, pointing out the sights and chatting amiably. I enjoyed going into the neighborhood stores with him, where he was greeted warmly and always took time to visit, and helping him bring in the orders from the truck, stocking the wire racks, and, as we drove, gorging on the fragrant chips. When Dave and Tilly died, Fred and Evelyn moved into a more conventional house, away from the beach, and built a commercial garage nearby for the new and modern trucks they'd acquired as their business grew. We continued to visit, and we remained very close, but it was never the same. Fred is gone now, with his vitality and fun, but his spirit is alive in his 2 daughters, who each have grown children of their own. We keep in touch, and when we see Evelyn, whom we adore, she seems the same to us. No older, still as amusing and cheerful as always. Whenever we see her, or hear from her, we're reminded of all those good times with Aunt Tilly, the bootlegger, playing the concertina, and her feet not touching the floor.